Hello and welcome to the AOPA Air Safety Institute presents Airworthiness Records, a guide for owners and pilots, Part 2. My name is John Collins and I'm the Manager of Aviation Safety Programs for the AOPA Air Safety Institute and your host for this webinar. Before we get started, just a few things to help you have a better webinar experience. First, please make sure you've muted your microphones, and if you have any technical issues, we're not going to be able to troubleshoot them during the broadcast. But logging out and logging back in will generally take care of audio issues. If you are having problems, please let us know via the questions. We'll talk about that here in a moment. We will take questions throughout the webinar. We have a time allotted at the end for a Q&A. Also, we have some questions that came in late in the broadcast on Tuesday. We'll answer those here in a little bit. Use the question mark on your PC or laptop control panel located on the right side of your screen, or the question mark at the top of the screen on your tablet or smartphone to submit those. The slides in the presentation are numbered, so again, we'd ask if you're referring to a particular slide, please use the slide number for that, and we'll be sure to be able to reference that during the answer. We also recommend having something handy to take notes with and perhaps a second device to look up references. Please feel free to take screenshots as needed, although we are recording this webinar and we will have it up on our website tomorrow at https://webinars.aopa.org. Again, that is webinars.aopa.org. Wings credit is available for this webinar, and if you signed up for the webinar with your FAA Wings account email, you'll receive credit automatically to your Wings account within a couple of days. If you didn't, please let us know again in the questions using the question function what your Wings email account is, and we'll make sure that you get that credit. For those of you that are using the AOPA Pilot Passport, which is a part of the AOPA app, attendance at this webinar will earn you an ASI webinar badge and another 1,000 points. We'll have more on that at the end of the webinar. And I'd like to welcome back our presenter, aircraft owner and CFII Mike Monefusco. And if you were watching right before we started, you might have seen his gyrocopter. That's a beautiful gyrocopter, Mike. I can imagine the fun you have flying it. So welcome back. You have the controls.
Okay, hey, good evening, everybody. Great to be here again. This is Mike. I'm going to turn the video off because looking at me serves no value in the presentation here, but it's more about the information that's on your page. And John went through all the points here. I thought a second device connected to look up references would be a good idea. Probably hard to do during the live presentation, but because this is recorded, if you have a chance to play it back and have a second computer and you want to try to follow through with the airplane that you rent or own and go through the steps to find the information on your particular airplane, it might be a little more comfortable for you to do it after the fact by watching the recording and then working with the second computer, okay? So this is the presentation that I sent in AOPA. It's called Airworthiness and Aircraft Records, and I set it up as a parenting class for renters, owners, operators, and maintainers. And I chose that word very carefully about the parenting class. Here's a little bit about me. I'm not going to keep this up very long. I've been around this flagpole a few times, done a lot of different things, everything from jet fighters to airliners and a few things in the middle. Our journey through this subject matter over these 4 webinars is going to cover a lot of different things. I showed this slide in the first presentation. This is our journey. We started with the multi-$1,000 question up there in the Pacific Northwest. The multi-$1,000 question, then we talked about the relationship between aircraft records and maintenance records. After that, we talked about ARROW, and then some responsibilities of owners and pilots in command, but specifically for the owner side of things. Now, in the ARROW presentation, several people pointed out quite correctly that the A in ARROW was not for airworthiness. It really mostly refers to, it's an unofficial designation anyway, but it refers to the airworthiness certificate. But after the presentation last week, I think you get I get the point is that having an airworthiness certificate has zero to do with whether your airplane is airworthy. The only time that certificate was valid and said your airplane was airworthy was the date it was issued, whether it was 10, 20, 30, 40, or 50 years ago. But it's a legal requirement that you have it, but that does not say anything about the current airworthiness of your aircraft. So this is what we covered in the first presentation. Today, we're going to go on our journey, go a little bit farther. We're going to talk about things specific to renters of airplanes. And I know a large part of the population is into renting aircraft. And then we're going to talk about the first of the really deep subjects, which is the type certificate data sheets, where that's what we're going to cover today. So I'm going to take our journey across the states and show you where we are as we start each presentation. Linearly, this is what it's going to look like in terms of the table of contents. So you can see what we covered on Tuesday and what we're going to cover this evening. Renters and responsibilities and TCDS, and then next Tuesday we're going to talk about ADs and service bulletins, and then everything else on the fourth webinar. We've got a lot of stuff to do. In review of what we did, the reason we're doing this is because we were posing some questions to you. What would it mean if you could, principally the first two things, reduce the cost of airplane ownership, that is your operating and maintenance costs, not so much acquisition, but operating and maintenance costs. And two, what would it mean to you if you could increase the attractiveness, value, and selling price of your aircraft when it's time to sell it to someone else? And either you move on to something different, or you buy a boat, or you buy a bigger airplane, or a bigger house. But whatever it is, you want to get good value for your capital asset. So that's what the premise of this program is about. We're going to start with renter-borrower responsibilities, as I mentioned that. Before we do that, I want to stop for just a moment. There were wonderful questions and very kind comments from the audience from Tuesday. I am humbled by the kindness of your feedback and the questions, and we did not have time to address all the questions that were sent in on the Tuesday webinar. So let me briefly go over for a couple of minutes some of the things we did not address. A gentleman said that he had an old airplane, he had a wing replacement 25 plus years ago, and apparently the paperwork that should have been filed, in this case a 337, never got entered into the FAA system, and so there's no record of the wings being replaced. He went to his local flight standards district office, or FSDO, and he got the answer which you all can expect. Yes, the airplane is legally not airworthy. And so he asked what to do in that case. It hasn't been airworthy legally for 25 years. If it were me, I would rush on down to the FSDO, talk to it, say, okay, I learned about this. How do I correct it? Before doing that, I would get together with the best A&P or ANPIA, that's with inspector authorization, that I know, and do a thorough and complete check of the wings today, document it properly, submit a post on 337, get that into the system, talk to the FSD about what you're doing, get it on record, get it posted in your logbooks, and you can't do anything about the past, but you can correct it so whenever you sell that airplane, that information is recorded properly. Another question had to do with getting a list of service bulletins. We're going to cover that not today, but next time. There is no such thing as a list of service bulletins. Well, there is, but they're really hard to find, and they're controlled by the original manufacturer of the equipment. It is not as well set up, usually, I have found, as airworthiness directives, but we'll talk about the service bulletins here in another webinar coming up shortly, okay? Question about if he has an experimental light sport airplane, what equipment do I put in the equipment list? And do I need to determine the ARM for each equipment? You know, it's not a hard and fast rule. Some people don't take the time for whatever reason, or the interest, or spend the money to actually develop an equipment list with the name of a piece of equipment, its location relative to a datum. Obviously, you have to establish a datum, and it's an arbitrary number. It's just a number for calculation purposes. Any A&P can help you do that, even if it's an experimental airplane. And you can then compute and put together an equipment list. There are airworthiness, advisory circulars that can help you do that. You can put together an equipment list. It's not terribly hard, and you can work out the differences, or the distances, the arm lengths, so you can get the moments that you need to work out all the weight and balance equations. Alternatively, some people will just weigh the airplane as is. The problem with that is when you take something significant off the airplane, if you replace a radio with another radio that's basically the same place and it's the same size, the same weight, it really doesn't matter a whole lot. But if you were to add something of significant weight, so you have an airplane that's a little larger, you put an air conditioner in it. Well, that's a big deal, because that can affect CG and power requirements and a number of other things. So The answer for that, as far as whether you need to get an equipment list, it's really up to you. It's kind of fun to put it together to see if you can do it. It's really not that hard, and you will learn something in the process. It may not be the best work of art that anyone's ever done, but it's a good exercise in knowing more about your airplane and where things are and the effect they have on the CG and the moments on the airplane. Um, Another question on that weight and balance asks if they can work with scales for the entire airplane. I know people that do that. It's okay as long as, if it's a small two-seat airplane and nothing's ever going to change on it. That seems to be fine. I've seen people do that, and the FAA seems to condone that as far as I know. Do you need next question, do you need a separate radio license for a handheld radio? Well, you need one for the radio in your airplane officially, although I've heard that no one ever checks whether you have that third class radio operator permit in your aircraft. You need it if you go internationally. And for us in the continental United States, that means principally Canada and Mexico. But I got some feedback from some of the folks listening on Tuesday that no one's ever checked. And I've been to Mexico a number of times in a small twin. No one's ever checked for that radio certificate, but it is a requirement according to the regulations. The certificates cost about, I think I heard about $70. It's a lifetime certificate, and it's an FCC Form 605, and you can just put that in a search on your computer, FCC Form 605, and you can learn all about the certificate. There's an online version you can post, or you can get a paper copy and fill it in. It's really not terribly difficult, and it's good for life. Another question, where can I find ADs for my specific aircraft? We'll talk about that next time. There's a very simple way to do airworthiness directives, and I'm going to show you how to get them, where to find them, how to read them, why they're important, what you need to know about them, and how you can address them in terms of getting your arms around your own aircraft. Some people asked whether the STC is required to be carried in the aircraft. The answer is STCs. We'll talk about STCs, but STCs in the writing of an STC, and the STC has 4 or 5 very specific parts to it. We'll talk about that in the 4th webinar. Some STCs, if they affect the operating limitations of the aircraft, for example, if you've put a turbocharged engine instead of a regular engine, and it's affected the gross weight of the airplane, the CG points, and the airspeeds that you fly, yes, you'll have to, the STC will say that you have to add that document to the airplane flight manual, or POH, and must carry a copy of that, and those changes need to be reflected, by the way, in your real checklist. So if you're using the original checklist on your XYZ airplane and you haven't updated the speeds in accordance with the STC and you're still flying the old speeds, you're flying in a dangerous mode. So we'll talk about that when we get to STCs. Other STCs, for example, you change the kind of muffler you have on the engine, or you change some little device which does not impact you operationally. Typically, you don't have to carry that one. You do not have to carry that on the aircraft. Okay, that's pretty much the questions that we did not get to last time. So thank you for your patience, and I hope that helps everyone else. Okay, renter-borrower responsibilities. At this point, the renters are the forgotten few, because we forget that we think they don't have anything to do. I just rent an airplane. I don't need to know about any of this stuff. Well, I'm going to give you some things to think about just a little bit as a renter. Okay, we talked about ARROW, the airworthiness certification, registration, forget the radio license for the moment, operating limitations, and the weight and balance and equipment list. Okay, but here's another thing you need to know as a renter. You need to pay attention to things like insurance. I mean, if you own an airplane, you obviously have to get owner's insurance. But if you're renting an airplane, you need to be thinking about supplemental insurance as the renter. And maybe you need to even ask whether the person or organization you're renting the airplane from has insurance. Let me tell you a story. There is an FBO, which I've come across in this United States. Wonderful FBO, excellent training organization. They have 10 airplanes, older airplanes. They're very affordable. They're no nonsense, extremely excellent in terms of their training programs and things. I asked, when I built this presentation, I asked the people, the person who runs this, who owns this organization, which I've known for many years, asked him what he was doing about his insurance. And he said, "What insurance?" I said, what do you do about your airplanes?" He says, "I don't have any insurance." There's not a drop, not a dollar of insurance on any of those 10 airplanes. Nobody ever asks him about it, and he doesn't volunteer the information to his students or to anybody coming over and renting his airplanes. I'm telling you this because if you as a renter don't offer a direct question to the person you're renting from about whether they have insurance or not, you might be hanging out to dry, because your rental insurance, which is just usually a supplement, a renter's policy, which is a supplement, may not be enough. So here's the first point as a renter. Do you know if the people you're renting from have insurance, and whether or not that insurance covers you, and if so, how it covers you, with what are the limitations? Now, you don't have to have a copy of the rental agency's actual total insurance policy. What you need is that information from their policy as it pertains to you, the renter, in terms of the amount of coverage for liability, medical, hull damage, and whether, what you're liable for. You need to understand that. Well, if they're not going to volunteer that information to you when you rent from them, then you need to ask them about that. So insurance is a big deal. How about the maintenance records? When I went to a rental agency, I go up there to the CSR, the customer service representative, and we do this little tap dance for 5 minutes. They hand me some keys. We say we're going to pay them some money. They say, go out there, take a ride for an hour, and do three takeoffs and landings with our local CFI, and you're good to go. At that point, I take my hour, three takeoffs and landings. Next time I go, they give me the keys. I jump in the plane and I go. Never once did I look at the aircraft records. I have no clue about whether or not these things on the right side of your screen have ever been done. You don't know if you're a renter, do you? Because all the renters I know never ask these questions. So let me tell you a story. There was, several years ago, this beautiful B-36TC. That's a Beechcraft Bonanza, and that's turbocharged, okay? It's a beautiful airplane, quite expensive airplane. And it belonged to a person I knew at an FBO, and he was fairly well off. He also had a Cessna 337, which is a twin. He also had a Citation 500, so he was well heeled, had a lot of toys, and he was interested in flying the faster things. And he was a great businessman, but great business people tend to want to do the fun things, and they don't do the backup work. And I sort of got the impression, having known this person for some time, that on the surface everything looked good, but maybe down underneath the surface things were not going according to Hoyle. So a gentleman contacts me during this time. I'm a Bonanza, what I call BPPP instructor, Beechcraft Pilot Proficiency Program instructor. And this person, friend of mine, calls me and said, "Would you give me a checkout in this B-36TC?" I said, "Sure thing, but we're going to do this a little differently. We're going to use a little checklist for renters, and we're going to ask about some things which I'm trying to instruct this person. Ask for some things that most renters never do." So we get to the airport. Guy's all hot to trot. He wants to go fly. And I said, "Not so fast." So I go to the CSR, the customer service rep. They dutifully give me the paper that says the airplane is perfect and here's the keys. And I said, "Well, hold the keys for a minute. Can you show me where the aircraft records are, the logbooks, the maintenance logbooks?" Well, this young person was very flustered because no one ever asked that question. They called the owner. I talked with the owner, and he said, "Yeah, it's 2 hangars down the other way to the south, and you go into this room, and it's in this closet, and they'll give you the key, and you can look at them right there. Please don't take anything out." I said, "Great, that's all I needed to do." So we dutifully left that office with the key to the cabinet, go down 2 hangars, open the closet door, and there are the proverbial 3 duffel bags full of stuff strewn all over the place in no order whatsoever. And we dig around, and after 5 or 10 minutes, we can find a logbook or a semblance of a logbook. We see there's several books. The airplane's a couple of years old, several years old, so it's got a couple of logbooks. We look at the airframe logbook, which is the first place to start. We open it up. go to the last page where there's an entry. I said, great. It's today's this date, so let's look back, at least a year. Let's see what's been done over the past year from the last entry. I can't find the annual. It's not in the book. I can't find the pedostatic check. It's not in the book. I can't find the weight and balance. It's nowhere to be found in the documents. And at this point, I'm saying, well, the airplane may be technically or physically airworthy here on the ramp, but legally, it's not airworthy at all. There were gaping holes in the paperwork. Sometime later, when I called the owner, he said, oh, I have all the paperwork. I just haven't put it in the books yet. That doesn't help me at all when I'm going to go out and fly the airplane. So we did not fly that day. I said, we're done. This airplane is not technically airworthy. And this is a decision you make as part of your responsibility as a pilot in command, but trying to educate this person that before you go rent an airplane, especially a fairly complex airplane like this, an expensive airplane, you want to pay attention to what's going on and ask some questions. This airplane the paperwork was in a pitiful condition, and it was completely lacking the very basics that one would want to know about. And yet the customer service rep was willing to give me the key and tell me we were ready to go. We could jump in and just take off. Now, let me tell you the clincher on this story. It's not over yet. I come to find out a short time thereafter that the local FAA flight group here in North Texas has a contract with this man to fly this airplane. And all the FAA pilots have been flying it for a couple of years. They don't know any different either. They've never checked the records. Even though they're the FAA, they've been flying an airplane which is not technically airworthy. And these pilots have no idea what they're doing because they never asked the question. So sit on that a while. Okay, so from that, I want to go back to the gentleman I spoke about last time. His name is Jack Tunnell. I spoke to Jack on the phone today and said, can I use your name in vain this evening? And he said, yeah, fine. Jack is the one who actually trained me on most of this because like most people who fly airplanes, I never knew any of this stuff. And Jack put his arm around me years ago and said, let me show you how this works. Jack has a great website, which you should write this address down. It's at the bottom left-hand side of your screen. It's twisted-wrench.com. www.twisted-wrench.com. And much of the information that I'm going to share with you in these webinars is on that website. And Jack is the most awesome maintenance guy I have ever met. But he knew that this was a problem, so he developed this checklist for renter pilots. And I take this every time. I take a copy of this and fill it out every time I'm going to start at least a new rental for at least the first time I go to a different place and want to affiliate with some FBO or agency where I would rent their airplane. And I go through all of these questions. Let me show you what's in here. First of all, we want to record the aircraft model and N number and serial number. I'd like to get the total time on the airframe and the total time on the engine and on the prop. I should be able to find that. Now, I tell you, if you take this to an FBO when you're renting an airplane, you will blow their minds. They will not like you because they don't know how to do this themselves. My hope is that you can change their minds. Just be kind and be persistent and say, I just would like to have this number. If you go there the first day and do not plan to fly, the first day you go to rent an airplane, just go figure out if that's really the organization you want to rent from, and is that the airplane you want to fly? Are the records in order? Just sit on it for a while. Don't be in such a rush to get off. So give yourself a little extra room here. So the first thing is the model numbers and serial numbers and the total times on the airframe and engine, okay? The next thing is the annual things that come due. Since they're renting an airplane, they have a requirement for a 100-hour inspection as well as their annual. Can you find that? Can they show you what that is? Or can you find it yourself in their records? If you're going on a flight that and the airplane has a VOR, some of the newer ones do not, but if you have an airplane that has a VOR and you're going to be having to use that for IFR requirements on your flight, is the VOR log, which has got to be updated, what, every 30 days, right? Do you have a copy of that? Is there an ELT battery on the airplane? When is the battery due? Is there a nav database in whatever unit they have in the airplane? Is it current? You're supposed to have a compass calibration card. That's not such a big deal, but you can check on that. Can you find evidence that the altimeter has been calibrated, that the transponder has been done? And there's the reference numbers for you, 91,411 and 91,413. It's due every 24 months. Do you have repetitive ADs? Now we're going to talk about ADs next time, but some ADs are one time and some are repetitive. So if it's repetitive, it means you do it once when it first comes out, the AD first comes out, and then the AD will specify when it has to be repeated. It could be every 50 hours, every 500 hours, every 6 months, every 2 years. The criteria is in the AD, but it's something that has to be done more than one time. So of the repetitive ADs on this airplane, can you see that they've been done at the appropriate repetition date? Okay, and when's the next one due? Additional maintenance or ADs due that maybe during the rental. If you're going to keep the airplane out, if you take a rental and want to go cross country and you plan to be out for, say, a week or 10 days, is something going to be coming due during that time? Usually not too much of a problem, but the point is what you're doing here is gathering data as part of your due diligence. Because when you take the keys to that rental airplane, you are saying, I have determined that this airplane is airworthy, not only just the physical airplane, but that I am legal to fly in this airplane. Let's look at the next block. This is where the insurance comes in. Okay, so this is the owner's insurance or the rental agency's insurance, and you want to see that they have what they have in liability and health. You don't need to know about the premiums. What you need to see is what is the coverage for liability, hull, property damages, medical maybe also that's not in here. Is there a deductible and how much that is? Are there specific endorsements? And is there subrogation involved, which means the risk is passed along to you or in some other fashion. So you need to understand how the subrogation works. This is not a program on insurance. Please don't ask me questions about insurance. That's not my area of expertise, but you can look up subrogation and decide when to do that. The point is you, the renter, need to ask the leasing group or the renting agency these questions and get satisfactory answers. After you do that, look at your own insurance. What insurance do you have? Now, I've had a CFI endorsement on my renter's policy, and I've got, because I fly lots of different airplanes, I've had it for years. I know what I have in coverage, and that's supposed to be over and above what the FBO has that's leasing me the airplane or whose airplane I'm using for training. It's not to cover a whole loss. It's just a supplement. That's what my renter's insurance is for. But if you don't ask the questions, you're hanging out to dry. Not a good idea. Are there any servicing issues on the airplane? Has it been leaking oil or hydraulic fluid or brake fluid or gasoline? I mean, does it have a leak in the stopcock on the bottom where you drain the fuel? Can you see blue around that? Is there servicing issues? Has the tire been going flat more frequently? Is there a discrepancy log that you can see what the current conditions? Do the landing lights actually work before you take it out for a night flight? I mean, if you can't find these things and you don't ask about them, you'll never know. And here's the clincher. This is where I get most pushback. I ask somebody there, their chief of maintenance, whoever that is, tell me that this airplane, sign this thing off. If you're not willing to do that, I'm making a 180 and I'm out of here, dude. I am not renting from you. And I've done that several times. They just gave me so much pushback, had their heels dug in. They said I was being unreasonable, and I am not unreasonable. I'm the renter. I'm liable for that airplane when I take the keys. I'm not doing this thing for spite. I'm trying to be an educated consumer before I get in the airplane. Now, this form, you can take a screenshot of it, but I will also include that in the package of handouts at the end of the fourth webinar, okay? I'm going to give you a blank copy of this form so you can use it, make copies of it. If you have any questions, you can call me or text me or email me. You can call or text Jack Tunnel. He is awesome, and this is just a great thing to do. And let me tell you, you will learn a lot if you go through this exercise. I guarantee it. Okay. That's all I'm going to say about renters. That doesn't get the hair up on the back of your neck. Nothing will. The next part of this presentation is going to talk about something many people know very little about. It's called a Type Certificate Data Sheet, or a TCDS. You may have heard the term. Some people know what it is, of course, in the audience, but many people do not. So I'm going to spend some time here talking about the TCDS. Let's start with a definition of what do we mean by the word airworthiness. If you look in the very early parts of the FAR, which is actually Title 14 of the Code of Federal Regulations, 14 CFR, in Section 3.5. Remember, we're used to using only what? We use Part 61 for the pilots and Part 91 for the actual operational parts in the airplane and the flying part. But we never go to Part 3. But if you go to Part 3, not Part 61, and you go to 3.5, it defines airworthiness, and it says specifically, for an aircraft to be airworthy, it must conform to its type design. Those words are very specific, type design, and 2, be in a condition for safe operation. And the type design is what is shown in a document called a Type Certificate Data Sheet, or TCDS. Now, a TCDS. You know what a birth certificate is. That's for a child, right? It's a birthing document. It's the record of something being born, coming into this world, for which you've taken responsibility for the rest of their lives. And you do certain things as a parent to protect and help that person grow, stay safe, get fed and clothed, go to the doctors when they need to, etc. The TCDS is the birthing document for your airplane. It's the thing that started the life of your airplane. They don't look exactly like this, but this is what a typical TCDS looks like. This happens to be for a McDonnell Douglas. Look, the DC-9s, all the different DC-9s, which I had great familiarity with the last two, the 9-82 and 83 at American. But your Cessna or Piper TCDS looks pretty much like this. And it's the birthing document. It has all the basic stuff in here that eventually migrated into your POH and airplane flight manual, and tells about the whole operation, what you can or can't do with your airplane. Okay, and that's called a TCDS. So it's a Type Certificate Data Sheet. So Jack Tunnell is telling me about Type Certificate Data Sheets, and like many of you, that was all news to me. I had never heard about that before. So he said, yeah, you look this up, and this is how you look it up, and you get one for your airframe. And I said, great. So I ran out and I got the TCDS for my airframe. I said, wow, this is really cool. Look at this. I found out what this was. It was for that Bonanza I showed you last week, that little Bonanza I was wearing. I found the TCDS, and I go hold it in my hands, and I'm shaking in front of Jack. I said, Jack, look, I found the TCDS. Man, is that cool? And he looked at me with skeptical eyes and said, what about the engine? And I said, huh? He said, oh, yeah, there's the TCDS for the engine, too. I said, no. Okay, back to the drawing board, run back to the house, look up the TCDS for the engine. Ah, man, cool. I got the airframe and engine. There's 2 TCDSs. Perfect. Run back to Jack's house. We have a cold one, and I'm waving him and says, Jack, I got the airframe and the engine. Dang, awesome. He looks down over his glasses and looks at me skeptically. He says, there's 3, dude. You got to get one for the propeller, too. No. Yeah, I got to get one for the propeller. So I'll run back home, go get one for the propeller. I said, dang, there's 3 of these darn things that pertain to my airplane. Holy smoly. So I got to get TCDSs for my airplanes. But what I learned from that exercise is that there's this really cool area of information about my airplane that I knew nothing about. And it had all kinds of useful stuff in it. Okay. Now, you want to find a TCDS for your airplane. Now, this won't work for experimentals. This is for type certificated airplanes, which means by a type certificate, it's airplane that's built by a manufacturer. Cessna, Piper, Beechcraft, Cirrus, Mooney, etc. It's not going to be for vans. It's not going to be for a Varga. It's not going to be for my gyrocopter. But this is for certificated airplanes. It means it has a certificate. It's not a certified airplane. It's a certificated airplane. Those 2 words are different. I am a certificated flight instructor. I am not a certified flight instructor. They're 2 different things. Look up the dictionary. Okay, but you find it in FAAsafety.gov under that quick links section I mentioned last week. So here's where you find it. This is the bottom of that front page of FAAsafety.gov. And in those links, there's a direct link to type certificate data sheets. Cool. So you click on the link, and what happens? It opens up and you get some information. Now, before we go into this, we've got to back up really for just a moment. Do you remember what I said on Tuesday, the thing you need to do first as we start this exercise? The very first thing you need to do is to make up a master models and serial numbers page, basically your giant crib sheet on your airplane. So this is a sample of the first part of an FAA registry for N19481. And what it has in it are some data blocks, and you want to capture that information. The ones in the upper left are the most important because I need to know that it's a Cessna 150L, which is very important, and I need to know the serial number, 1507 4443, okay? It's a 1973 airplane. Now, the other information is nice to know, like when my certificate, my registration is going to become due again. In this case, this airplane will come due in October. Who owns it right now? These are my buddies at the Majors Flying Club in Greenville, who I worked with for many years. Okay, and it's got a Continental 0200 series engine, but that's not the engine information. That's just, it's a 200 series. We don't know what model of the 0200. We know it's the 0200 series. I want to take this information from the registration and I want to put it on that master models and serial number page, okay? So I'm transferring it. So this is a way to look at it. Now I made this in landscape mode. Mine is normally when you do this on your computer, it's on 8.5 by 11 paper and it's in portrait mode. But for the purpose of PowerPoint, I did it wide scope so you could see it. It's the same information, I just formatted it differently. In the upper left-hand side, what do you see? You see the information on the airplane, Cessna 150L, the N number, and the serial number. And then you see the same information that I looked up about the Continental engine. In this case, it has a 200A, and it has a serial number. And the propeller is a Macaulay 1A101, and very important, HCM 6948. Those numbers all mean something. I'm going to show you what they mean shortly, and the serial number of the propeller. Now, there's other information that you're going to collect, which I have not put in the boxes here, when you get into the airplane and you look under the hood, you see the alternator somewhere around the engine there, find out who made it, get a mirror or something and get the model number and the serial number, the vacuum pump if you've got one of those. If you've got magnetos, who makes them? They should both be by the same manufacturer, same model number, but you'll have a left and right serial numbers, so that'll be different. Who makes your radio? Bendix King, a KLN 89. I never did get the last number for the serial number. It's usually behind the radio, and unless you pull the radio out of the dashboard, you can't see it. ComNav is a Michaels MX300. The transponder by Bendix, KT76, etc. So what you're doing is you're getting all that information in one place. Now, with that information, we're going to start looking up the TCDS. But if you don't have this done, you're scrambling around and you'll be all over the place. So please, first thing, start making up your own models and serial numbers paper. It doesn't matter what the format is. Another handout I'm going to give you at the end of the program is a master in Microsoft Word that you can fill in as a starting point, but please feel free to tailor it in any way that you think makes sense to you or as fits your airplane, okay? But I'm going to take these information, I'm going to start looking up things. So I go to that TCDS page, which I clicked on, that link from the front page of FAAsafety.gov. And when I come up there, this is what comes up. This is the first page that comes up. And what you will notice is that there's on the left-hand side, there's a number of ways you can look up TCDSs, but you probably don't know the numbers or the products particularly. So the one you care most about is making it up by the TC holder, okay? The TC holder, the type certificate holder, is the person who manufactured the airplane, okay? And you want to look it up by TC holder. And then you'll notice that also across the top on the right, there's a through Z list, and you see there in blue, which means what? It means those are hot links because there are so many, they do things in alphabetical order. So you want to look up this thing for the Cessna. So you go to C and you click on Cessna. And when you go to C, you realize that there's nothing there in Cessna. And why is that? Because if you've been in the airplane business any length of time at all, you know that Cessna and Beechcraft and Bell Helicopter are all owned by whom? They're owned by Textron, which is a Canadian holding company, okay? So Textron keeps all the airplanes. And over time, the FAA has been migrating their Cessna information from the C group here to the T group. Okay, it's over T group. So you click on T. You click on that letter T in the upper right. Now, when you click on that letter T, the T pages come up, and it's in alphabetical order: TAM, TAN, TAR, TAY, etc. Okay, so you want to go down to Textron, and there are several Textron entries. There's Textron Aviation Defense, probably not a defense airplane, Textron Aviation, and Textron Lycoming, Avco, so that's probably engines. What you want to have is Textron Aviation. Now, you may bumble around and try the other ones, and you'll see right away when you click on these are links. A page will open up and say, nah, that's not what I'm looking for. But eventually you'll find that it's Textron Aviation in this particular case. I'm using this Cessna 150L from the Majors Flying Club as an example to show you how to go about it. Obviously, you need to do it with your airplane when you've got the time and patience to go through this. You go to Textron Aviation. So now I go to Textron, I click on that link, and what happens is I go to the Textron page, and then it says, whoa, all these things open up. And you'll see these are the Cessna model numbers in the first column in blue. Cessna 100, the 120, 140, and 140A, the 150A, B, C, D, E, E. And we want to go down here to Cessna 150. We want to go down to the 150L. So this is the airplane model 150L, and in the next column is the TCDS number. If you'll notice, the TCDS number is 3A19, but it's all of those are 3A19 for all of these models. So 3A19 is what's called a collector TCDS. It covers a number of different airplanes. So it's got some basic things that are relevant to Cessna across the board, and then it has specific differences for each of the models. And it's a collector. It's just very frequent. You'll notice down at the bottom of the page, 3A12 also covers a whole lot of 172s. But 3A19 is the one you want, okay? So you click on 3A19, any of those links, or 150L. Either of those links will take you to the next page. And the next page is going to be, if I click on 150L, it's going to show me this page, which is the 150L, and it says G in this case, but 150G, but it's the same one. The thing is, the TCDS number's in the upper left, and it's in blue, which means it's another hyperlink, 3A19. So I click on 3A19. Going on, moving on. I click on 3A19, and then this page opens up. It's a TCDS example, and I'm not there yet. I'm working on it. Okay, now this says 3A19 Rev 50. So when this airplane came out in the early 1970s, which by the way is like, guys, close to 50 years ago, there have been revisions to the TCDS because they've added to the TCDS and incorporated into them after the fact some upgrades and modifications. For example, they may now allow 2 or 3 or some number of additional propellers that they didn't have available. So the TCDS will list not only a standard propeller, but they may have 4, 5, 6 different propellers. They may have a dozen different aircraft generators. They may have 2 or 3 different sets of wheels, tires. They may have, and so every time that they incorporate a larger scope of equipment that you can add to the airplane without doing anything heroic, they upgrade the TCDS. When I was working on the Bonanza that I was telling you about last time, in the 2 years that I spent working on this book, takes a long time, by the way, the 3A15 was the TCDS. It changed twice. We went through 2 rev changes completely in the 2 years. The basic stuff hadn't changed, but there were different pieces of equipment that got added. Okay, long story short, we see another blue thing says 3A19 Rev 50. I click on that link, okay, Rev 50, and it takes me to the actual type certificate datasheet homepage. And I've put in red here, this is where it says TCDS 3A19. Okay, so this is what the TCDS looks like on the homepage for Cessna. For Beech and Mooney and everybody else, it's going to look slightly different. This is about what you should expect. Okay, and because this is a collector TCDS, if you look in the upper right, you will notice this particular TCDS, it's actually 19 pages long, and it covers all these different kinds of airplanes. Okay, so it covers a lot of things. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at some of the information in the TCDS. So if you'll notice on the bottom here where it says we want the 150L, and we notice in Roman numeral 1 here on the bottom of the first page or somewhere after the preliminary material, that Roman numeral 1 is the section of the TCDS that covers, in this case, only 150s, 150As, Bs, and Cs. Okay? These are two-place airplanes, a utility category, and it was, you see what the dates are, 58 to 60, 61, 62. We don't want Roman numeral 1. We want to go someplace else. We want to go to section Roman numeral 5 in this TCDS, which is some number of pages beyond that. And it's going to say Model 150L, two-place airplane utility category, approved June 1970. And in this section are going to be some interesting things. So the standard engine, the only engine approved for this airplane without doing something heroic, is a Continental O200A. Okay? And so if we look under the hood of the airplane, I should see a marking that says on its data plate O200A, and on the data plate of the engine itself, I'm going to see the serial number. It won't be on the TCDS because it covers all the 150Ls. But on the data plate of the actual engine, I will look at and record the serial number, in this case 214841-72A. And I put it on the sheet. I printed it on my TCDS because it's permanent. Now you can use a thick pen like a felt tip pen, and I print out the TCDS because I'm going to save that and make that part of my records. I don't want to have to go through this bloodletting exercise of looking it up again. So I'm going to print this thing out. I'm going to mark or highlight with yellow and put in bold print like this thing on the right, the model number and serial number that pertains to this TCDS that I'm looking for. So here's the basic information. We know it uses 8087 fuel, and the maximum limit on the engine is 2750 RPM. That'll give me 100 horsepower. And there's no options there, guys. That's it. Okay? Now, the next thing we might notice is that at the bottom of the page, you'll see it says Macaulay 101A101 GCM. Well, that's not the prop we have, but it's got a number 1 in front of that, Macaulay. So, hey, there's more than one propeller. In fact, there's 2, 3, there's 4 different propellers you can put in. So from our master crib sheet, we're going to look at the propeller information we got from the engine or propeller log or wherever it was recorded. I'm going to put that on this page also, on Macaulay 1A101 HCM 6948, okay? And we're going to look at the top there. Number 2 is a 1A101/HCM. So that's the propeller. The next one down is a PCM, and the number 4 is an OCM. We want the HCM. So for this propeller, here's the weight of that propeller, 27.7 pounds, and its data point, its arm is minus 34.5 inches, okay? And it's used on 72, 73, and 74 models. This was a 1973 model. How do I know that? It's on my master sheet that I got the numbers from when I told you to put that record together, okay? The diameter has to be between 69, 67 inches, and that's what you need to know about the basic propeller. So that's information that's interesting. Down further on that page, I want you to notice that the airspeed limits are shown. I told you this is the berthing document for your airplane. These are the numbers that populated eventually your POH. This is where they came from. They started life here in the TCDS, and they migrated over to the Airplane Flight Manual, or POH. This is where they came from. So don't take umbrage with the POH. This is where they came from, unless there's some differences that occurred later on. These are the numbers that you should have, and they usually give them to you in both miles per hour and knots. Okay? So what else is here? In this TCDS, a little further down, we'll find the CG range, which, guess what? Got translated to the weight and balance portion of your POH. Gave you the limits, 4 and 1/2 limits, and the weight ranges. You found out the maximum weight was 1,600 pounds. That has 2 seats, where the maximum baggage is at 120 pounds, how much fuel you can carry, and the oil capacity. And all of that information from this birth certificate got into your POH. That's where it came from. Okay? Now, there's a section at the bottom of this portion, this Roman numeral 5 section of the TCDS, which says serial numbers eligible. Remember, we recorded on our master sheet the N number, the registration number, and the serial number, 15074443. And sure enough, we look, and you can see the red box on the 3rd line there on the eligible serial numbers, that our serial number falls as a 1973 model in those things, in that range of serial numbers, means this TCDS is applicable to that airplane. Cool. Making progress. It's actually pretty easy to do. If you go through it a couple times, it becomes pretty easy. But again, I find it useful to print this out. You can only do so much on the computer, but if I print it out and I try to save paper, print front and back, if you have a printer that will do that. And you can either, I have the full Adobe Acrobat, the full system, so I can actually highlight stuff in the computer. But if you don't have that, you just have the reader, print it out, use a yellow highlighter, and you can do it yourself and just mark this thing up so that it's easy for you to find things. When you see something that applies to you, highlight it or put a big thick felt tip marker and write on the side there, just like I've done in print, C150L N19481, serial number 1 yada yada 1507. Okay, but write it on the page, easy, so it's easy to read, easy to see. Okay, simple to do. Okay, now I go to the TCDS for the Continental O200A engine, serial number 214841-72A. So I looked that up the same way I looked up the textual information, but Continental is going to be under C, I think. At least it was when I did this. And you will see that in the upper right, this is also a collector TCDS because it covers a number of different Continental engines, including the O200A, B, C, D, and X. All right, it's going to be formatted a little differently, but it's the TCDS for the engine. It's going to look different. It's set up differently by a different manufacturer, has different kinds of information. Let's go further down into this. We'll see that there's a table here. I print on this page. By the way, I printed this whole thing out also. I'm going to use a felt tip marker, or I'm going to do it directly on the program if I have the wherewithal. Continental O200A, serial number 214, etc. On this page specifically. And then I'm going to highlight that O200A, which is the far right column. So I know what? I know what its rating is, what its takeoff horsepower is, its maximum RPM. I can tell you that it uses a certain kind of carburetor, a Marvel Schaebler carburetor, MA3 SPA, and it has some other information there in Continental that applies to this particular engine. Okay? I go down a little bit farther, and what do I find? I find out, hey, here's my timing. So that's timing before top dead center. If you know anything about engines, you'll know about that. So it's supposed to be at 24 degrees before top dead center and 24 at the bottom dead center, okay? Spark plugs, it says C note 6 for spark plugs, and oil sump quality, C 6 and 7. It doesn't have any notes down there also. But this is going to tell you for the spark plugs. So if you have this information, now you have some ammunition so that when you talk to, if you do talk to your maintenance vendor and ask them, what is he using or he or she using for a reference to adjust the timing? How did you verify the timing in the annual that this timing is set correctly on your engine? And you know where to look, okay? 24 inches before top dead center and 24 before the bottom. And you know where it came from. This is where it all started life. Okay, not in the maintenance manual, started here in the TCDS. When I look at my maximum permissible temperatures for the O200A, I can see my maximal permissible cylinder head temperature, 525. My oil inlet, 225 to 240. If you're using straight mineral oil, if you use detergent oil, which is what we use normally in operations, we use mineral when we're breaking in something new, but we use detergent oil for normal operations, that our maximum oil inlet temperature is 240. And also, look in green there, C note 6. So this is note 1. There's something going on in note 6 we need to pay attention to. Okay? So we go look through the notes there. After all the TCDSs, this is at the very end. Not in Roman numeral 5, but at the very end of the TCDS, there's going to be a section of notes, and the notes are numbered. So note 2 has to do with carburetor fuel inlet pressures, oil pressure limits. So that's where you get your oil pressure limits for your gauges, 30 to 60 psi. Okay? And the minimum oil pressure with the engine idling and hot oil should be 10 psi. The vacuum pump, what it's supposed to put out in terms of torque and moment and how it works. Let's go on to a further note. Note 4. Note 4 is about the C90 engines, O200Cs, O200Ds, O200Xs, but nothing about O200A. Note 4 doesn't apply to you if you have an O200A. You can look at the note here. I don't know if you can see this where my cursor is. It says the D is similar to the O200A except for similar to the O200, but there's no paragraph in here that relates specifically to the O200A directly. Okay. If I go to note 6, now here's note 6. It says I got to have certain kind of detergent oil. This is the kind that you should use, and so you need to make sure that you get the right oil, and you will probably get information at the time you get the airplane. You should have that in the servicing documents. If you have any question, this is what you bring to your maintenance person, and make sure you get the right kind of oil, know which one to buy, and make sure that person is using the right kind of oil when they're doing your annual. And now you have some ammunition because you can have a more intelligent discussion with your maintenance person. Okay? Note 7 really doesn't apply at the first part there, but the bottom part, see the C90, the -8, -12, but below that, look in the bottom, O200As, Bs, Cs, Ds, and Xs. So these are the spark plugs that you can use in your airplane. Okay, you got a choice of different manufacturers and different model numbers. So, I can put Rotax spark plugs in my from Rotax in my gyrocopter. They're $23 a piece, or I can use a different model that's $1.95 each. Uh, so I'm going to do the thing that's a little smarter. I don't have to have a Rotax spark plug for $23 and have to buy 8 of them. I'm going to do something more economical. So this is telling you what you can buy. And sometimes if you buy them and you make sure you have the right ones, you just give them to the maintenance person and let them do it. Or you take a chance on them putting the right ones in. But you need to check, what plugs do you have in your airplane right now? Take a look on it, see if you can tell, and then check it against this. You'll get smarter in the process. Okay, now let's go to the third TCDS. This is the one on propeller. So the propeller, when we look that up, we look up under M, we look at Macaulay propeller. We have this number, 1A101 HCM, and the serial number. And it's going to give you, when you, in the original lookup, it's going to say data sheet is P-918. And this is a little bit of a collector also. It's got several different propellers you can see on the right-hand side. Okay, we want the 1A101 propeller. We look at the 1A101, and you can see that there's a lot of different addendums after that, suffixes. We don't want the MCM, the DCM, the GCM. We want the HCM. The HCM there on line 5, I've highlighted it and put a red box around it so you can see. These are the specs for propeller. This is how big it's got to be, 72 to 66. Why? Propeller gets shorter with time. It wears off. It changes size over time. At some point, it's not going to be serviceable anymore because some things have changed. It has a standard pitch that goes from 68 inches to 38 inches as you go up and down the root of the propeller. It's a 6-hole. That's how it attaches to the hub. Okay, the diameter of the holes, they're 25/64 inch holes. The bolt is 4 3/8 inches, etc. The hub diameter and etc. And the weight is 25.7 pounds. And that weight includes an integral dowel spacer. So this is all the information. Now, you're not the maintenance person. I know that. You know that. What I'm trying to do is arm you with good information, or at least to know where to find it, so that if a question comes up or you want to learn a little bit, you can approach your maintenance vendor and ask that person to show you certain things. And over time, you will learn a little bit at a time. But you have to know how to ask a question. And the only way you can do that is to understand where some of this stuff came from in the first place. Okay, now I go back to note 1. This has notes in it also, and I go down and you see it's 100 or 1A100 MCM, ACM, and finally down here near the bottom, 1A101 HCM has a SAE1 flange propeller shaft with Macaulay such and such spacer, must be installed with Macaulay drawing B4352. Well, I think I would work to get a Macaulay drawing B4352 and have that in my maintenance records, so that I could make sure that with the airplane, I have that information. Now, your maintenance person should have that, because they can't check if it's been installed if they don't know what's in the drawing. If they don't have it, you got to ask yourself, why are you using this maintenance person? How can they check to see if this is done properly if they don't have the drawing? So make sure you have the drawing, and it's not hard to get. Okay, look at the Macaulay website. Okay. Also, later on in this TCS is the secret decoder ring. the propeller model designation. Tells you what these different numbers mean. So ours, remember our number said 1A101 HCM 6948. So what does that mean? Well, the 1A100 is what? The basic design number. The HCM is going to be what? It's the certain kind of a flange fitting. Okay, it's got an HCM flange fitting. The first two digits after the HCM have to do with the diameter of the propeller in inches, so it's 69 inches on our prop, and the pitch at 75% of the radius, going outside the radius, is in our case 48. 48 is the pitch. Okay, so that's how to read the propeller information. We go down further, we go to note 9, we see no other notes in this section. So this is telling you what propellers you can use with which engines. So it doesn't give you the 1A101 HCM cannot be used with any other series of engines. All right, and that's going to conclude what we're going to cover tonight. I think that's enough to chew on, and we're getting ready. I can't emphasize enough, before we go into the AD section, please try to at least get started on your master models and serial numbers paper, so that you have that handy next time. It's going to mean a lot. With that, John, I'm ready for you to come back.
All right, thanks, Mike. Another full night of information here. Got some questions that have come in. I also would encourage you to continue to submit those as we go through here. Let me get back up to the top, see what we've got from earlier on. There were a couple questions going back to that radio operator certificate, radio station certificate.
Yes.
And those are actually two different certificates. So there's a station license for the aircraft if you're operating internationally. That actually is not a lifetime license. That's 10 years and actually a bit more money wise. I want to say we had somebody send that in there. Yes, it's a 10-year license. And in February, when Ray purchased one, it was $170. So there's that. And that's on the form 605, and I believe there's a separate form. I don't have the number right at hand for the restricted radio telephone operator license, which is that lifetime certificate. I know when I started flying back in the 80s, I had to get one inside the U.S. We don't require that inside the U.S. now, just when you go international.
Yeah, I think that's called, that's not a license. I think that's an operator's permit. The other one may be a station license, but I think for the individual, it's called an operator's permit. But yes, yeah. I'm sorry, I'm rusty on that. I haven't done that in years either. But you know, the information is available by going to the FCC website and just kind of reading through it. That's where you look, and they'll help you out.
Yeah. John sent us a little story, which is really sorry to hear this. At his last annual, his prop was sent off for a check. Word came back that it was out of tolerance, would need to be replaced. And after asking some tough questions from the AI, he told him that the last shop to overhaul the prop had been closed by the FAA for substandard work. And he was shocked there hadn't been any notices of this event. But a good reason to get into your paperwork, as we're talking about your records, as we're talking about here in this series, to try to stay ahead of that. And I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about that, Mike, or if you have.
Well, that happens. It happens with car dealers also. I mean, it's no way to really do it. I can tell you that over the past 20 years, I've taken many groups of flying clubs and students to in our area here near Fort Worth. Byam Propeller. Mr. Byam passed away several years ago, but he was just a marvel. We would go through his shop, and if you've never been to a propeller shop, it will water your eyes. I mean, he took us through and showed us what went into testing and marking and certifying and fixing propellers, and it just blew me away. Everybody who went there just was in awe of what happened. But you can't tell about a station's reputability unless you feel like you want to be proactive. And I suspect, I don't know this for sure, you might be able to call the FSDO, the maintenance guys at FSDO, and ask if there's any less than honorable information available about a certain vendor. a certain shop that's you plan to want to use, they should
Yeah.
have some. They may have some information. They may have
Yeah, if
some
they've gotten
information.
complaints, they should probably have
Yeah, they
a
should have
record of
something in
that.
there to tell you if anything is on record. That's about the only thing I know. Other than that, you can ask for references. Who's had work there done previously. I've done that many times. I hear horror stories. As a Bonanza instructor, I've heard horror stories about maintenance from a lot of the owners, and that's because they were doing something with a friend as opposed to somebody who actually knew what they were doing, and well-intentioned but didn't have the right background to actually do justice to the maintenance activity. So there's a number of things that can go awry. It's a difficult area. The best thing we can do is to be a little more knowledgeable about how this all works. It's not going to solve everything, but when you can ask some direct questions, I mean, not to be mean or anything, but you have a right, you're the aircraft owner, to ask reasonable questions, intelligent questions about something and how something works, or if it's the right number in an airplane, have someone show something to you. And if you're armed with that information, it's just worth a lot. It's going to help you a lot. And this includes renters, by the way, includes renters.
Absolutely. Another question here is Oksana asks, is there something analogous to TCDSs for LSA aircraft, such as a Cessna 162?
Not that I know of. I'm not aware. I do not have a lot of experience in the experimental side of things. I mean, I have this gyrocopter, but I never dealt with experimental airplanes until this 2 years ago. And mine is made by a company in Germany. There is nothing except the documents that they sent me for the building process and the POH. And there's nothing else. Now, the company sends out service information. They have different forms of service instruction or service letters or something like a service bulletin. They all have little different flavors, but nothing that I know of that would be considered like a TCDS. And they don't really have, I haven't even seen anything that looks like an airworthiness directive, but there are service instructions or service bulletins that you might get from some experimental developers.
Okay. All right. Santosh asked a question. Does the FAA have a system analogous to IACRA, which is used for airman certification, for airworthiness and maintenance records online?
Not per se that I'm aware of.
Okay.
What they have is what we're going to go through in the next several sessions. We covered the first of the deep stuff material, which is the TCDS. Next time we're going to do the airworthiness directives and service bulletins, and there is no master system. It's hard enough to keep these three things going. The FAA gives you the TCDS and the ADs. The service bulletins have nothing to do with the FAA, so you have to go to the manufacturers for that information. And to the best of my knowledge, no one aggregates that into some neat compact package. They have all they can do to do what they do now, and that's about the best we're going to get.
Okay. All right. SK asked the question, do all these pieces of information come with new planes right out of the factory, or do owners still need to go and download it all? So if you buy a brand new aircraft, are you going to get all this, or do you still need to do some of that detective work and pull
You
it
get
all
nothing
together?
with the new airplane. Okay, you get the airplane flight manual. You typically do not have STCs installed. You get the airplane, which is that you get the TC'd airplane. The STC is what you do after you own it to modify the airplane above and beyond what you can do that's been already authorized in the type certificate data sheet. So in this example that I did this evening, we saw 5 different propellers, but you find out that since this 150 came out, another company has built a propeller that will work, and they've gone through all the certification process independently from Cessna, and they have gotten an FAA has issued them an STC permit to sell you that propeller, and with the STC instructions for changing out your propeller, you can then add that propeller to your airplane, but it's not in the type certificate. It's something you do separately and pay for separately. So the only thing you really get from the manufacturer is you're going to get, a blank maintenance log, maybe airframe, engine and prop log books, which they'll give you as a courtesy. Again, they're not required that you have them in books. I talked about that last week, but they will do that because they want to make it look pretty, and it's going to be a good way to keep your records up. They may give you a main loose leaf binder with different sections about maintaining the airplane, but it'll be essentially empty other than the initial sign-offs that their engineers and people have given to get the airplane out the door. John, your screen's coming up on my.
Yeah, let me get the right presentation up there. Sorry.
So, but the answer is no. They don't give you anything, and so you never get the TCDS unless you look it up yourself. You're never going to get the ADs unless you look it up yourself. It's not hard to do. I'm going to show you how to do it. It's actually quite simple once you know what to look for, and it'll be like walking on water after we're done. It's going to be really simple. So just bear with me, and I'll show you next week. And you're going to say, "Wow."
Eric has a question. Mike, if the particular oil has a cross-reference to another type and stated equivalent, one is on the TCDS and one isn't. Can either one be used?
I don't know the answer to that question. It's really simple. I think you've got to be very careful. It may look like the same, but what typically happens is there are differences in additives, which may or may not be documented in the information you see. And while it appears to be the same viscosity and the same rating on the oil, there may be other smaller amounts of additives that may or may not be suitable for your engine. I think you want to be really careful here. I've called some guys at Shell, Aeroshell, when I've had oil questions. There's a guy there that's just a whiz, and when I've had real questions. But again, start with your maintenance person. I would ask the engine manufacturer, call them directly. They have a customer service line, Continental, Lycoming, whoever's doing your engine, and talk about, ask them about the oil and what you found out, and what you're asking, whether or not it's a suitable alternative. But there's no flat answer. It may or may not be.
Okay. All right. William gives us a little clarification on some of the experimental stuff. He says there is a difference between SLSA and ELSA. SLSA does a better job with service bulletins and service directives. Also, ADs apply to certificated equipment installed in an SLSA. So a little clarification there for us.
Okay, thank you.
And then let's see, another question came in. If you're looking for a TCDS for an older aircraft, Vince tells us that TCDS actually came into being as a term back in the late 50s, like 1958, when the FAA was formed. So if you're looking for a TCDS for an older aircraft, it is actually known as an aircraft specification sheet. And that's the term you want to look for something older, say maybe like a pre-war Stinson or Taylorcraft or Cessna, something like that. So that may be helpful for those of you that have older aircraft and want to take a look for those.
Yeah, I did not know that. Thank you. That's excellent.
Yeah. Let's see. I think that is it for the technical questions. A couple of things that I want to touch on briefly. I've had a few questions come in about wings credit. Yes, if you have signed up for this and you did use your FAAsafety.gov email address that you signed up for your account there, you'll automatically get the credit. If you didn't, please send it to me. You can get a hold of me via email at john.collins, COLLINS, @aopa.org, or you can send it to us here in the questions section. We'll get that, and we'll be able to add you to the list when we submit it for FAA Wings credit. If you missed the first session, I highly encourage you to go back and watch it. We are recording each of these sessions, and they will be posted on our website at webinars.aopa.org. Tonight's session should be up tomorrow morning. That's my goal anyhow, and we'll get that taken care of for you. And then we talked a little bit about the AOPA pilot passport badge. So we have a really nice app called the AOPA app, and within that we have the AOPA pilot passport. And by participating in the ASI safety webinars, you earn badges and points. And this webinar's code is ASI Web 052021. And that is available until the 31st of May. So please, if you use that, let me show you how to get into the AOPA Pilot Passport and redeem that code. So first of all, open up the AOPA app on your device. And in the upper left-hand corner, you see I have circled it there in yellow. There is a menu. Go ahead and tap on that. And then when that opens up, tap on Pilot Passport. And then My Pilot Passport. Then you can tap on My Points and Badges and scroll down to the bottom. You can see down here at the very bottom where it says Redeem Affiliate Code, tap on that. And then when that next page comes up, enter the affiliate code and you will be able to redeem tonight's webinar badge, and you'll also get the points. Make sure you type it in there and then click Redeem Code, and that will take care of it for you. Again, that code, for those of you that are doing this, ASI Web 052021, and we will be happy to give you that credit and that badge. If you are interested and you'd like to help support the ASI safety education, we do it without using member dues. All of our revenues generated from our flight instructor refresher courses, and then also donations that are generously provided by pilots and owners and aviation enthusiasts like yourselves come to us through the AOPA Foundation. If you'd like to support us, please go to aopafoundation.org and click on the link to donate. We appreciate your support in that. We're also supported tonight, sponsored by Sporty's Pilot Shop. They are sponsoring our summer series of webinars, and we really appreciate that. I know a lot of us are very familiar with Sporty's. A lot of good products there, and I certainly encourage you to take a look at them. And if you're in our neck of the woods here on the eastern half of the U.S., go fly in and grab a hot dog from them. We've got great fly-ins, and this is the time of year to go do that. If you're not an AOPA member, I'd highly encourage you to become one. Join the largest general aviation organization in the world, aopa.org/join today, and they'll be happy to help you out. You can sign up online and become a member, and you'll get benefits such as our AOPA Pilot Magazine. You can also subscribe to AOPA Flight Training and enjoy our website and all the information that's there, AOPA Live, all the stuff that we've got. So I'd highly encourage you to do that. And on behalf of Mike and myself, and all of us here at the Air Safety Institute and AOPA, just want to wish you a happy evening, great evening. Thank you for watching with us, and fly safe. And we'll see you next Tuesday for part 3 of this webinar series. Starts at 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific, and we'll see you then. Have a great weekend and fly safe.